All right, let's get started. Hi, everybody. My name is Lara Greenberg Cavezza, and I am the Director of UX at a company called Notarize. Katie?
Hi, everyone. I'm Katie, and I'm a systems designer at GitHub.
Hi, everyone. I am Olga Perfilyeva, and I'm a product design manager at BotKeeper.
And the three of us co-organize the Boston chapter of Ladies at UX. So for those of you who have joined us before, we welcome you back. And for those of you who are new, Ladies at UX Boston is a monthly meetup group featuring female and non-binary speakers. So we are open to all genders and experience levels, and we cover topics related to design, research, and career development. All right, so before we dive in, we want to emphasize our code of conduct, but you can go to this link to see it, but at a high level, our community is dedicated to providing a safe experience for everyone. We don't tolerate anything that makes anyone feel unsafe at our events. So please do go to this link, read more details. And if you do need to report anything during this event, you can reach out to the co-hosts through the Zoom chat. And additionally, we are recording this event and we'll be sharing it out on our YouTube channel. So now I'm going to pass it over to Katie again.
If you haven't signed up already, make sure you join our monthly newsletter. We share jobs local to Boston, remote jobs, and upcoming events. So if you have any open roles at your company that you'd like to share, just shoot us an email and we'll include it in our next newsletter. I'll pass it to Olga.
Thank you, Katie. As some of you know, we always encourage networking at our events. Now that the event is actually online, we encourage you to engage in the chat. If you have any updates related to any work-related updates, or you'd like to introduce yourself, please write it in the chat. And also, if you have any jobs that are you're looking to hire for, or also if you're looking for a job, please share that in the chat. We are welcoming any type of work-related announcements.
Awesome. All right. Thank you both. So I am so excited to be moderating this panel that we have tonight. And tonight we're going to be talking about how you can stand out from the crowd and land an associate UX job, whether you're looking for your first UX job or you're looking for your second or third, or even if you're looking for a UX job and you're a bit later in your career, you know, I'm sure you'll learn a thing or two from our panelists tonight. So before we dive in, we sent out a poll, and before we get started, I'm going to go ahead and end this poll and share out the results. So it looks like a bit more than half of you are looking for your first associate UX role. So welcome to you all, and you've come to the right place to hear from our panel tonight. We just have one person looking for a second or third associate UX role, and a few folks looking for a different level UX role, and then some who are not currently looking, but will be in the future, and one other. So thank you all for filling out this poll. So we are going to dive in to our panel for tonight. And before we do that, I'm going to just give you a little bit of information about our panelists. So starting with Minjun Chen. Minjun is an upcoming product designer at Microsoft. Graduated from Human-Computer Interaction and Design at University of Washington, Minjun has worked at large companies and early-stage startups, including Amazon, Wayfair, HTC, and College Vine. She is passionate about helping young and aspiring designers to grow and land their dream jobs, particularly designers who identify as women of color. Minjun is currently living in Seattle with her cat, and she cannot live without 3 cups of coffee every day. Minjun, do you want to say a quick hello?
Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to join tonight. Yeah, happy to share my learnings.
Awesome. Thanks, Minjun. And up next, I'm going to introduce Mariana Gomez. Mariana is a UX research coordinator at Square. Originally starting her career in marketing, Mariana is no stranger to career pivots. She left marketing to pursue the mental health and nonprofit space and eventually landed in the tech field within research. Her path is windy, and she wants others who might have a similar atypical path to feel confident about the value of each stage of their professional journey and leverage the skill set and experience gained at each stage. Some of what attracted her to research ops Mariana is a systems thinker who enjoys learning about the interconnected nature of things and people. She enjoys making sense of things that may seem tangled or not entirely clear. Mariana is a born, raised, and current New Yorker who loves everything bagels with lox and probably walks too quickly. Thanks, Mariana. Do you want to say a quick hello?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to be here this evening, and I'm looking forward to learning from you all.
Thank you. And up next, we have Maya Rhinehart. Maya is a self-taught product designer, artist, ex-civil engineer, mental health advocate, Spanish language learner, and aspiring writer. She currently works as a product designer at OM Studio. Over the past few years, she has embarked on a self-compassion and acceptance journey that has led her across the globe. In her spare time, she enjoys reading, doodling, designing, and building websites for nonprofits, mentoring junior designers, and perfecting her chocolate chip cookie recipe. Thanks, Maya. Do you want to say hello to our audience?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Grateful to be here. Looking forward to chatting with you all and hopefully sharing some great wisdom and hearing some great wisdom from the other speakers as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Maya. And finally, we have Cara McGrath. Cara has been designing for Boston-based startups since completing her BFA in graphic design from Northeastern University. As lead product designer at Notarize, she focuses on enhancing the company's B2B products and managing 2 talented product designers. In her day-to-day work, Cara genuinely enjoys untangling complicated UX problems, secretly loves trying to find bugs, and actively strives to give thoughtful design feedback to her team. Outside of the workday, she enjoys cooking, riding her bike, seeing concerts, and, let's be honest, watching TV. Cara, would you like to say hi?
Hi, everyone. Like everyone else said, I'm happy to be here as well. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm looking forward to sharing my thoughts.
Awesome. Thank you all for introducing yourselves. So let's dive right into some questions. And we're going to be asking the panelists questions for until around 7:15, 7:30-ish, and then we'll open up the floor for about 15 minutes to folks for Q&A from you all, by the way. So first question that I have for you is, what do you think helps associate UXers stand out when it comes to their portfolios and resumes? So I'll direct this one to Cara first.
Sure. That's a great question and a great place to start. So as I have screened for prior candidates, I would say the first thing I see after your name is the resume. And for me, coming from a design background, of course, the contents of the resume matter like abundantly, but at first glance, I'm very curious how the design of the resume looks. So if you're applying for a design role, I think it's really kind of your first split-second first impression to show me that you understand the basics of layout, typography, hierarchy, and communicating information clearly. If you're applying for a non-design role, I think that recognizing that is still very important, and perhaps using a template or, putting in the time to design it as best as possible as well is super valuable. After that, I would say in terms of the portfolio, this is where it gets a little tougher. So to me, I would say trying to find that first big project that's outside of the classroom, outside of a boot camp or outside of your schoolwork is really like the first thing that can help you stand out. So whether that's something that you work on with friends or at an internship or at a contracting position, I think getting 1 or 2 real world experience projects on your portfolio can really make a big difference, especially when a lot of projects from the classroom can look relatively similar to one another. And then the last thing I'll say is, especially if you're career switching, I'm really curious, like what you were doing before. I think what you've learned in your prior experience can sometimes be taken for granted in terms of being extremely applicable to UX. So I would heavily recommend, don't kind of start your resume from zero and, because you're switching fields, like communicate what you were doing before. And, that might really stand out to somebody and have specific skill sets that can make you stand out from other candidates as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Cara. Those are some great tips. And how about you, Minjun?
Sure. So let me share some of my learning from the more like the candidate perspective. So in terms of the resume, I think first thing coming to my mind is trying to using as many as UX design keyword as possible. So what is the UX design keyword? That is something you should be just dive deep into some job description for the UX and the product designer role. For instance, a lot of kind of associate designer position mentioned about like maybe like workplace, like PM or stakeholder. So trying to rephrase this kind of keyword into your resume. So you can say something like collaborate with like stakeholder or business owner or other like stakeholders to like receive design feedback, something like that. I think that having such kind of keywords from UX design keyword on your resume can help the recruiter identify you are a potential like candidate to this specific role. And the second thing for the resume, I totally agree with the Cara said previously, focusing on the design of your resume. Everything should be like consistent. Trying to, if you have your personal like branding, you can incorporate your logo into the resume and make sure that there's no like typo and everything is just aligned and consistent. And the other, so speaking about the online portfolio, so there are two types of portfolio actually. So one is the online portfolio, the other is like more like in-person like portfolio presentation decks. So speaking for the online portfolio, I think there's a couple things you can consider to help you stand out. The first one is as a junior designer, you don't have to put everything, like put too many projects on your portfolio. I think 3 or 4 is a great amount of number of the case study you can put on your portfolio. And the second is trying to select this project with intentionality. So trying to, especially for the first one, usually the hiring manager will click on the first project, trying to demonstrate all your design product design skill sets in your first project, including like product thinking, visual design, interaction design, or some sort of collaboration skill. And then the rest of the project, the second or the third, might be some specific project that demonstrate your superpower or your areas interest. Maybe you are good at mobile prototyping, or you are interested in virtual reality or augmented reality. You can show this type of project as the second or the third project. So you don't have to just put everything, like every design work you have been done on your portfolio. And the third thing is trying to craft the story, trying to think about what is the narrative and what is the story you want to bring into each case study. And I think one of the common mistake a lot of like junior designer made was they are following the typical human-centered design process on the portfolio, and they trying to put everything like wireframe, like user flow, journey map. However, we don't talk about what is the reason for us to do this user flow or do this like persona. You always need to talk about the why and always bring yourself into the story, like how you are as a designer overcome the challenge and then reach the outcome and help your team to get a successful result at the end. So always think about like more like a story perspective, but not follow up the typical process you learn from the school or the boot camp. Yeah, so I think that is my thought on the resume and the portfolio.
Yeah, that's great advice, Minjun. And before we switch gears, Minjun, would you mind also sharing in your experience what has helped associate UXers stand out in the interview process?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. In a more higher level, one thing, first thing is always be prepared for the portfolio presentation slide, because that is definitely something you can prepare before you go into the interview process, and trying to think about what is your superpower and strengths and how you can leverage your superpower into this presentation storage, and always select a project that can demonstrate a broader range of the product design skill set plus your superpower. And again, like the visual design also matters for your portfolio presentation deck. The second one is in terms of like answering the questions after portfolio review or answering any behavior question. Trying to be confident and comfortable when you are answer any question, because no one at the room know better about this design project or know better about the works, because you are the person who did these kind of projects. So trying to be just take the time and calm down and answer the questions in a logical way. And the third one is there's a lot of like resource talk about like whiteboard and equity, and that is also something you can prepare in advance, and trying to leveraging the framework for the whiteboarding. For example, for the purpose of the whiteboard is not about I have to draw some fancy prototype or wireframe at the end. It's more about your thinking process, design thinking process, and what is your problem solving process. So it is about how you interact with the interviewer to narrow down what is the user problem, what is the problem statement, and what is the goal of this exercise. So trying to ask as many as questions and make assumption for this exercise before you create any deliverable. And the same thing for the equity. It's also like you don't need to dive deep into a specific flow and critique at the very beginning. You have to talk about like who is the user, what kind of problem this company trying to solve for, and like what is the like business goal or success metric for this kind of app. So a lot of things like you can definitely prepare in advance. So and you can leverage the resource, like you can practice with your friends or your mentor for this kind of whiteboard and exercise with portfolio review. So that is my thoughts on this question.
That's really good advice, Minjun. And anything to add as a hiring manager there, Cara?
Sure. Yeah. Minjun, I think one thing that you said that stood out most to me, it's a great point that, you know, there's kind of two different flavors of your portfolio. There's the portfolio website, which is sort of what's going to get you the interview. And then there's the presentation that you're likely going to give to the hiring manager or the rest of the UX team, or maybe a cross-functional team at the interview. So, you know, for that part in particular, I would say, first off, you know, like introduce yourself and tell us a little about you. I know this is really, really basic, but we're all in a very remote, strange world right now. And it could be nice, a nice way to stand out, just to understand you or your personality a little bit better. From then on, I would say, and Minjun, you make another good point. You can prepare the presentation in advance. Like, you know, you want to be ready when you get that interview to perform your best. So I would say it's typical that, you know, you probably present one or perhaps two projects during a project walkthrough. And I would say to be prepared to really speak to like your best one. And if you feel like you have a few really good ones, you could definitely stand out by picking a project that is most relevant to the company or the type of role you're going for. So say you have a really good like B2C mobile design project, but you're going for a role at a big like, you know, desktop B2B company, maybe you want to pick your other project instead. So I think kind of like picking the right project for the right interview is a good job or a good choice to make. If you don't have that flexibility, I think it's really reasonable to kind of be humble and point that out, and try your best to connect like how your experience that you do have does relate to this role and your willingness to learn in general. And then other just like, I think it never hurts to like come prepared with smart questions about the company. And kind of going back to what I mentioned before about prior experience in different industries. It can certainly help, say you have prior experience in something like the restaurant industry. Maybe that makes you a great candidate to apply to a company like Toast or, another big restaurant tech company, and kind of highlighting those skills from your pre-UX life, I would say can definitely make you stand out during an interview process as well.
Thanks so much, Cara. Those are great suggestions. I love the one that you said about making sure to ask really smart questions in the interview. It's important to do your research on the company and ask questions about the history of design there. Ask questions about the product, about the vision, about the team. That's something that definitely has made people stand out to me in the interview process for sure. But let's switch gears away from interviews and portfolios for a moment. And I would love to learn about, for those of you who switched into UX from other careers, how do you use that to tell your story? And let's start with you, Maya.
Yeah, thanks. So I switched from civil engineering. I have a degree in civil engineering into product or UX UI design about 3 to 4 years ago, and also leveraged a lot of these great events to understand what that'll be like. So thank you so much. But yeah, I'd say, coming from an engineering place, a lot of folks think you're kind of fancy or have this fancy engineering degree, which, I guess is true. I don't know. I try my best here, but I definitely hope that that very expensive $200,000 plus degree taught me something. And leaning into those some things is what is super important. And for me, that's a lot of problem solving. And that's actually honestly my favorite part of the UX process and things like that as well. And so what I mean by that is if you can find a key translatable piece from your former life, and how do you maneuver that or leverage that information into this new career transition, it's super important in weaving and telling your own story. And I would also say leaning into those soft skills is also incredibly important, including all the little things, because people ask, what's one of the hardest parts of your job? And I'd say communication, right? As humans, we're pretty bad at communicating with each other. And that's definitely a piece. You're communicating with your engineers, you're communicating with your clients. If you're working in consulting, you're communicating with your friends in the product side. And so leading into those soft skills or even those translatable pieces is really important. So even if you were, like a restaurant manager or maybe even a barista, I'm sure you're incredibly talented at juggling many, many different priorities as well as time management. And those are important skills that are totally translatable into my job every day, right? We need to be able to manage the priorities of different stakeholders, as well as the ideas of other folks and figuring out how to communicate that as well as time management if you're working with clients and things like that. Also, Cara mentioned this as well, but same deal. If you worked as an educator, it would be great for you to work at some type of education startup or something like that. So that's even just another piece that you can tie in together. All this expertise that you have is definitely translatable and useful. So leaning into what you know and leveraging that can be incredibly powerful in telling your story and drawing those connections, as well as highlighting those skills that you do have as you move into this new career.
Those are great tips, Maya. How about you, Mariana?
Definitely plus 1,000 to everything Maya said just now. I think my advice there would be similar. So finding whatever the common thread is that's leading you from your past life into your new one. And I think that's something really important from the beginning of your search, is to be very intentional about what kind of role you're looking for. I think sometimes there's this fine balance between casting a wide enough net that you don't close yourself off from any opportunities, but also in that time where recruiters and hiring managers are looking at your profile. If I once had someone tell me by looking at your LinkedIn, it says you're a project manager, a UX designer, a UX researcher, I'm not really sure what you do. And that was a hard thing for me to accept. I was like, I don't like that. You're kind of raining on my parade, but it was true. I had to do some searching and really think about what is it that I want to pursue to sort of tailor my application materials, to tailor my resume, to tailor my portfolio. So that way, when a hiring manager saw my materials, they're like, yes, this is it. This is it. It also helps you to sort of talk about how you want to, or speak to your previous experience, because if you're applying to a UX designer role versus a research ops role, I might speak differently about my experience as a clinical assistant at a mental health counseling clinic. If I'm applying to be a UX designer, I might talk about how I interacted with the software. I might do a case study on perhaps some of the EMR, like the electronic medical records software I was working with. But if I'm doing a job in research ops, I might talk about my interaction with clients and scheduling and logistics. So it'll help you in the end when it comes to planning, just to be very specific. So I would say that's my first piece. It's hard, and you think about like, I don't want to close myself off to other opportunities, but it will help you in the end, I promise. The other thing I would say is finding that commonality, and as Maya said, just really being confident about it and speaking to it. And if you're willing to, some people do leave their previous careers because it's not something they really want to spend time in anymore. But if you previously used to be a mental health counselor and you're still willing to work in the space, that is really practical knowledge and expertise that you have that you can now apply to the mental health tech space, which is growing. The same thing if you were a server or a restaurant manager, you can apply that to some other tech companies that might be in that space. Or if they're planning to expand into that space, which sites is important to keep up on company news and trends and things like that. So I would definitely say the other thing that is really important is working on crafting your narrative and saying it to people out loud over and over again. It feels uncomfortable, but the more that you do it, the better you'll get at it, and the more comfortable you'll feel with it, and you'll know what I want to change, what I want to keep the same. Also, someone close to you might be able to tell you like, I know you, and this, it sounds like it's missing this, or, like you spoke to that, like lean into that a bit more. The other thing I would say for switching careers is try finding examples of people who had the same path as you. So if you're a speech language pathologist, see if you can connect with other UX designers or researchers or whoever that also used to be SLPs, and pick, if you can, have some of their time, see like what worked for them, because you don't have to do this alone. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's other people who are probably in your field who are now in UX, who more likely than not, if you ask politely, will be willing to share with you like what worked for them, what were the transferable skills that they spoke to, and brainstorm with you on how the work you previously did was relevant to now. I think the other thing to Minjun's point is be confident about the value that you bring. It can seem intimidating sometimes when you're applying with people who have like HCI degrees and UX degrees, but the work that you've done before is really valuable. So just remember that and keep that at the forefront of your mind.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mariana. And former speech language pathologist here. So if anyone in the audience has that background, I'm happy to chat. And to the point that was just made, my first job in tech about 8 years ago was at a language learning company. So that was how I told my story. It was very related to my background. So it really does work. And one other thing to add on that, even now, Cara and I, as we think about hiring new designers into Notarize, we're looking for folks who maybe have like a background in the real estate industry or things that could really help them understand our users. So definitely a very important point. Thank you.
Can I add something onto that
Please
real quick?
do. Oh, yes.
Sorry, I just forgot to mention. So before I started working at Square, I worked in retail for 7 years. And there was a period of time that I was like, what is this going to be good for? What did I do? I don't know why I did this. And then when I met my hiring manager, I was able to say, I have 7 years of experience working behind a point of sale. So just don't sleep on your past experience, because you never know where it might take you. That was it.
That's amazing, Mariana. Thank you for sharing that. That's awesome. So, okay, Mariana, I'm so curious to hear more about your role as a UX research coordinator. It's a unique UX role. So tell us a little bit more about the role itself, and would love to hear more about the journey to this role.
Yeah, absolutely. So my role as a UX research coordinator falls into a larger segment called the research operations world. If you look it up, there's a community, there's a Slack channel, there's a few different, I believe it has a website, but essentially it was started by this person named Kate Towsey, who was at Atlassian. And I fell into it, I think, while I was at a boot camp. I was taking a tech boot camp, and somehow I had heard about it. And I was like, oh, this sounds interesting. I previously worked in logistics and operations, and I knew throughout my boot camp, I was really interested in UX research. So I'm like, oh, let me look into this. So I looked into it, and it seemed like the work I was doing before in operations and logistics just applied to researchers and giving them the support that they needed. So after my boot camp, I started applying to different jobs, and I realized, again, being real with myself, saying, Mariana, what is it that you want to do? I'm like, okay, I want to be in the research realm. But I was also really good at and enjoyed logistics and support work. That's just what makes me feel fulfilled, is like being able to help people, being able to strategize. So I went from marketing to mental health to UX research. So really my goal is to be able to help a client, whoever that client is. If it's a company, if it's a person, if it's stakeholders, I want to be able to strategize you to wherever it is that you want to be. So I applied around. Research coordination roles are still pretty new. So some of what I do is participant management, which basically means a lot of working with our research team to recruit folks to do research with. So most of the time it's our sellers, and to make sure that logistics are taken care of. So the who, what, when, where, who are we speaking to? What teammates are they speaking with? How are they doing it? And it's the small details that researchers might take on until research starts to scale. As the hope for any company, you want every team to grow and the products to continue to expand. So it's a bit of participant management, making sure that folks are scheduled, logistics are in place, incentives are paid. It's also knowledge management. So keeping a digital archive of all of our findings after we speak to all of our amazing sellers and we get these insights, and making sure that those are kept somewhere. So later on, teammates can continue to leverage those insights and they're able to be used in the future. It's also some process standardization. So how do you do a job when there's no one in that role before you? So it's a lot of like wayfinding and figuring things out, like, okay, this was our process before. We need it to look more like this. How can we do that? So it's a lot of like tooling. It's a lot of like thinking like, okay, well, if we want to have this output, how can we apply, this method to that? It's some project management. It's some trying things out. It's some being uncomfortable when you don't know exactly how things are going to work out. And the thing about research operations is that it is an industry-wide thing that's happening. I think that more and more companies now, I'm seeing at least, are getting, if not a research ops person, a research coordinator, because of the fact that I think before it was seen as like something a researcher could tack onto their day's work, but it's pretty time consuming. Recruitment, making sure you're not tapping the same people on the shoulder over and over again for research, to make sure that you are getting a diverse range of perspectives in your products, because you don't want to be building just for one specific kind of person. So all that to say, that's some of what I do. Yeah, it's been really awesome. I also work with our research team during actual sessions and studies and help to record and document some of those findings. So all in all, it's been a really fulfilling process so far, and I've enjoyed growing with the team.
That's awesome, Mariana. Thanks for sharing that. And I'm totally seeing that trend as well, of seeing UX research coordinator roles popping up more and more, research ops, and also design ops. Similar sort of role on the design space, which is like so interesting and really fun work for sure too. So definitely folks should keep an eye out for those roles if you haven't heard of them.
If I can add on, another thing.
Yeah.
So I like to kind of think about, I think I missed this part. I like to think about the way that I ended up in research ops as sort of like design for researchers, because essentially you're sort of like making a service, because you have stakeholders that need something. We need to speak to these people, and you are the person that sort of designs like how it's going to happen. So you coordinate the touch points. Yeah, so I just wanted to put it out there. For, I know when I first started, I was like, what? You're doing research about people who do research and how to get them to do it better. So it can get a little meta, but yeah, just wanted to add that.
I love that, Mariana. And I agree, like we don't have a research or design ops person at Notarize quite yet, but some of the design ops work is like some of my favorite part of my job. Like it's really interesting to think about how to make the team more effective and everything in their day-to-day work. So thank you for sharing that. That's awesome. So next question is for Minjun. Minjun, you've done a lot of mentorship of associate UXers in the past. What advice have you given that has helped them to be successful in their job search?
Oh yeah, so here are a few like advice I always share for more like associate designer role. the first one is definitely like before you get into like each round of interview, make sure you check in with the recruiter about what thing you are going to expect during that interview. If you don't, sometimes like if you don't check in with the recruiter, maybe they won't share some additional information about, yeah, this will be the whiteboard challenge, or this will be the behavioral question with some informal like portfolio walkthrough. So double check with the recruiter before you go into each session. The second advice I always share was definitely like prepare your portfolio presentation in advance. And like a lot of like speaker, we already talk about like the crafting our story, especially when you are introduce yourself during the portfolio presentation. Always think about like what is your past and current experience, like what you learn and what kind of skill from this experience match to this specific role on the teams, and also doing the research for this company. One of the great example I have seen recently was one of my mentee, she did the research and she searched on the company news on the Google, and then she took the screenshot of that specific news and highlight some keywords on this newsletter, and the keyword including like enterprise, a million user, like high impact. So when she was introduced herself in the beginning of the presentation slide, she pull up this screenshot and talk about why she fits into this specific role, because she have done lots of like enterprise product design work, and she was looking forward to have more like impact on like million of user. So she builds up connection, and also show she also done the research for the company. So this kind of like small thing will definitely help you stand out from other candidate. And the other example was one of my friends, she was interviewing with the company who are working on this kind of movie and the film industry. So she tailored her story around like how the movie impacts her as a designer, as a human being in his life. So all of his like introduction story is all around like my past experience and my job experience around the movie. Even she wasn't working at any kind of product areas related to the movie industry. But this part definitely helped her stand out from other candidate, because everyone will remember this product designer who are really passionate about these industries and who have all the skill fit into this specific team. And the third advice I always share was about like knowing about knowing about what is your strengths and weakness, and because self-awareness, this kind of attitude is also something hiring manager they are looking for the junior designer position, junior designer candidate. So always like especially for example, if you wish to change anything on your like case studies and you didn't done really well for this specific part, always mention it as a way in your next step. So in this way that you can show you have such awareness on something didn't work really well and you would like to change in the future. So I think self-awareness and other like learning attitude, like curious to learn and grow, this kind of more like the mindset attitude part also can help you stand out from the other candidate. And the last advice I would like to share is I think like finding your first job, especially in the UX design role, is not an easy task. So don't feel so stressed out around all these kind of different like messaging or announcement on LinkedIn about like I got a job in blah blah company. I think always focusing on your personal growth and don't be too stressed out by like other, because they are not you are designing your career. You should take such responsibility on yourself. And having such kind of more like positive attitude, and always learn from the mentor and looking for the feedback from more senior designer to help you, to guide you for the job searchings. Yeah, I think that this is all my advice.
That's great advice, Minjun. Thank you for sharing that. Awesome. So Next question is for Maya. So Maya, as someone who recently switched jobs, what was your strategy for standing out during the interview process?
It's a great question. I first want to just start out by saying that interviews are stressful, right? They're stressful for all of us for many different reasons. I mean, there's like a lot of layers to an interview, right? So not only are they interviewing you to see if you could work for them, you're also doing a little bit of interviewing them, as well as they're looking at your presentation skills, your communication skills, like they're looking at your designs, as Minjun pointed out, from your presentation, or even looking at your resume and things like that. So there's just a lot going on in the interview in general. But the good news is a lot of the stuff that they're looking for is coachable. And of course, you are just trying to put your best foot forward. And so most of the stuff that I thought of for thinking of this question relates to that second step. So after you've gotten through that first phone screen and you've made it into the more longer form interview, which I've seen take on a whole bunch of different forms, sometimes you have to do an app critique, other times, you've got other stuff going on, which all that stuff, it's definitely important to prepare ahead of time. So that's like the first thing I'm going to say, which has come up a couple times. So I won't go too in depth there, but being prepared and tailoring whatever that presentation is. I know there's tons of information online for you to do those practice app critiques, but also in terms of that presentation that Minjun mentioned, like what tiny little details could you add in there to put yourself like forward? So something that I randomly do, this is probably over the top, but I love to tailor my case studies that are in that presentation to like match the like project UI. Like I'm talking everything, like even the first slide where I'm introing what the project name is literally looks like a login screen. This might be a little extra. You don't have to do that. But what I'm saying is your details do matter. And additionally, I try to make this presentation easy on myself by always having it be a PDF. And the reason is like you can go as fancy or as hardcore as you want in Figma, and you can just post it to an image and put in a PDF. If your internet fails, you can email that PDF to the person and talk through it over the phone. So make it easy on yourself, and I just have it as a PDF, easy breezy click through type of thing. So I guess that advice there is just to add like a little bit of spice or whatever it is that's you into that presentation, which kind of leads into the second one, which is has to do a little bit more with you interviewing them. So being yourself. And I know this comes with like a great asterisk on it because we're all wearing masks for a variety of reasons at all points in our day, showing little bits and pieces of ourselves when you can. And that's what I'm suggesting in that interview. Something that I tend to do is I'll splash in a little joke here or there. And I don't know, I don't think I'm that funny, but depending on how the person reacts, I'm like, okay, could I actually work with this person or not? And I'm hoping that also adds to like the little bit of the weird culture fit type of interview that's happening behind the scenes that I mentioned. So then the person can like see who you are. Like we're all just human beings trying our best, right? And so hopefully through that connection, maybe you can show a little bit of yourself, which again shows like that little maybe extra bit that you need to get through to the next step. Additionally, something else I do, this might just be to make myself feel better. I'm not sure if this helps me stand out. Maybe it does because I sound super extra confident, is I straight up write a script for hard questions. This is like a really great thing to lean into, especially in the remote world. Like I literally have like notes up on my computer right now, but it looks like I'm looking at the camera. So this is definitely something that I have done and do all the time, especially that salary question, which I'm sure y'all have had whole talks on just that salary negotiation piece. But if you're nervous about like any little detail, I'm telling you, I word for word, and this is to this day, like I've been through a lot of interviews. I will word for word read it out loud to make sure that I stick to what I was trying to say and make sure that I get it out. That can be incredibly powerful and hopefully can maybe get rid of some of those nerves, as well as even like when you're doing that presentation that I mentioned, like having the notes right there, but practicing with your camera so it looks like you're looking like lean into that remote world and how it can help you do that. And then the final bit is like so old school, but I don't know, I feel like this is something they tell you when you're first looking for a job, is I send a thank you email. You don't have to find every single person's email address. I literally just type all their names in there. Like you know, such and such, such and such, such and such. Thank you so much for talking with me today. I appreciate your time, you know, throwing a little blurb about what you really liked, and then just send it on through. Doesn't have to be that intense, not any handwritten notes or anything like that. But again, just finding those little pieces to show you're human, show who you are, and, you know, thank them for the opportunity, hopefully help in the end. So feel free to steal any of those ideas. It's worked. I have a job. So anyway, that's it.
Thanks, Maya. Those are great suggestions. And yeah, for better or for worse, that thank you email does certainly make people stand out and is important in that way for sure. Cara, as a hiring manager, I'm curious, when you interview UX, associate UX designers, what is it that you're looking for?
Ooh, the magic question. Yeah, that's a really good question. So I would love to start out by just kind of addressing the fact that, like, there unfortunately aren't a ton of associate roles out there, period. And I think the reason is because, you know, the earlier you are in your career, most likely the more support you're going to need in your role. So not every company is capable of hiring for that type of role, which is unfortunate. So I think when a company is able to open that role, they're often looking for somebody who they have faith in, basically, to be able to grow in the role and to eventually become more and more autonomous in the role and grow out of being associate and into mid-level in time. So I think there are a few kind of key traits that I've looked for in interviewing folks that are earlier in their careers in UX. And they all kind of relate around that. So initiative and desire to grow. That to me means kind of a lot of stuff that we've talked about. Like, I love to know not only what were you doing before, but like, why did you choose UX and what got you here? Like, I'd love to know you're passionate about it, and kind of see your true desire to grow in the field. I think when it comes to a presentation of a project, I would never expect a perfect portfolio project, period. But I think the way that you speak to your work, the why behind your work, showing your process, you know, sketches, how you got to the solution, what you learned from the project, all of those things can speak miles, and really kind of indicate that you're, you know, you have a desire to be coached in your role, you have a good mindset to take on more complicated work as it comes to you, and you have the initiative to grow. I would also say this can come into play with the questions that you might ask. Again, like, UX is all about problem solving and getting to the right questions and finding the right solutions. So I think indicating that you're curious about the company, about the role, about the team with the questions that you ask. This is something that I'm looking for as well. I think that somebody who's naturally curious tends to be good at UX. So I love to try to see as much of that as possible. Let me think what else. Yeah, does anybody else have anything to add? I feel like this is like a really interesting one, even just from a recent candidate's perspective as well.
As in, like, what are we looking for from employers, like Riverside?
Interesting. Well, maybe. Why not? Yeah, what are you looking for?
I think so. Something I do that I recently started doing is asking management questions, or asking questions to managers, like, tell me about a time that, because this is also your interview, so this is your time to get to know them just as much as it is for them. It's not for them to grow you. You can ask, what's a time that you messed up and you had, what happened, please, like, and just listen to the way that, you know, they answer that question. how was it resolved? So you can learn more about like conflict resolution or like how people take ownership, things like that. I think the other thing I'm looking for, kind of similar to what Maya said before, is like kind of like that culture fit piece. Like, how is it that the conversation is flowing? Asking about like management styles, asking about, you know, like who you'll be working with. I think sometimes asking these things can be like a little like hard or intimidating. You're like, I don't want to offend them. But in my experience, it's never offended anyone, and they've usually been more than happy to answer. And if someone's not willing to answer, like let's say they're not willing to share, or they can't think of a time that they made a mistake, I think it's like interesting things to keep note of, because we all make mistakes, we're human. So yeah, I think that's one thing.
No, I think that's a really good point. And that also goes back to Maya, what you were saying before of like, you're interviewing the hiring manager too. And I think as an associate UX candidate, it's really important to kind of vet the employer to make sure they're going to provide for you the support that you need in your career. There's a lot of different types of teams out there. Some are, you know, you'll be the first designer. Some, you know, you'll join a team of 80 designers. And that would be a really, you know, those two options are really different paths for your first role. So I think there's something to be said about really thinking about that and very intentionally coming to that interview and asking the right questions of the hiring manager as well, to make sure that you're going to get what you're hoping for in your first role. That said, you know, getting your first role can be tough, but you should never just take one if you don't think it's going to be the right fit. You know, we all deserve to be happy in our careers, and it's worth, you know, you can be picky as well. It's important to be at a place that you feel comfortable and happy and feel as though you can grow your career. Sorry, I went a little rogue on that question, Lara.
That's okay. Going rogue is great. Going rogue is great. Thank you, Cara. Thank you for that. Thank you for chiming in on that, Mariana. So, all right, if you could give your past self advice when you were looking for your first UX job, what would you say? We'll start with you, Minjun.
Yeah, maybe three things. One is write as many as possible and don't limit yourself into a junior or associate product designer role. If you see some position with like 2 or 3 or 4 years experience, definitely just apply it. You don't have anything to lose if you apply for that job, because sometimes maybe some manager, they will interview with you because they are interested in your background. The second thing is practice. Just practice a lot before you go into the interview session. The third thing is what is this? The third thing is rejection is very common. And whenever you get the rejection, trying to reflect on yourself about what things worked really well during the interview, what didn't work really well. And if you can looking for some feedback, if the interviewer or if the hiring manager, they can share, you can ask the recruiter for the feedback if they can share something with you, because all this learning you take from this interview can help you get the job at the end. So this is my advice.
That's great, Minjun. Thank you for sharing that. How about you, Maya?
So everything Minjun just said, as well as just the simple thing of it will work out. I know that seems so maybe obvious now that I'm on the other side, and for folks who are searching right now, especially for that associate role, which can be just so hard to get that foot in the door. It may feel like you've gotten hundreds of rejections. I remember I was just like applying to jobs and forgetting which ones I was applying to and just sending in random, I don't even remember. Like when I got the response for my first job that I got in product design, I literally did not remember the application and had to go back and like find the email that I sent. But the reason I'm saying this is it can seem really daunting and never ending, but all of those little things you're doing, coming to this workshop or, reading a Medium posts every single day, or continuing with your boot camp, late at night, getting your project done, or reaching out to people on LinkedIn and having 90% of them not respond to you. Like all of these tiny little things that you are doing right now are adding up, even if it may not feel like it. And even if it may feel like you're just on this winding path that you don't even know how it's going to end, because eventually you will send an application, or you will meet that person, or you will respond to the correct Slack message, and you'll get your foot in the door, and you will get that opportunity. Because as it was mentioned earlier, curiosity and wanting to learn and eagerness and just moving forward is also important, especially as a new candidate, looking on the other side. And so much of what you're doing and learning right now is coachable, like all the stuff you're learning, right? Like UI skills, all that stuff can be improved once you do finally get that spot. So that would be my advice is, hold out hope and continue to push forward, because you will get there. And also it's totally okay if that first job doesn't quite work out, because everything is a learning experience, and each position you have and each thing will help you move forward. So for instance, I answered that question earlier about getting a new job recently, and that's because the last job I was at for about 6 months, and it was just not the right fit. And I got another opportunity and I moved elsewhere, and that's okay. I learned so much from that opportunity, to the point of for instance, I do really enjoy working on smaller teams, to something Cara mentioned earlier about having a team of 80 versus a team of 8. I prefer the team of 8, but I had to try out the team of 80 to learn that wasn't for me. So that it will work out. All this is a learning experience, and eventually you'll find your foothold for a little bit, and then who knows? Who knows what's next after that, right?
That's awesome, Maya. That's great advice for your past self and for our present selves as well. Thank you for that. All right, we're going to close out with one last question here before we open it up to the audience for a couple of questions. So any final advice for people looking for associate roles in UX? Any final things to share? And we'll start with you, Mariana.
So some things I would say is make sure that you're drinking enough water and you're getting enough sleep and some kind of physical activity. I think it can be very easy to get caught on the computer for hours a day. So just as a reminder to be gentle with yourself, be kind to your body, and it will continue to serve you. The other thing I would say, similar to Maya's point, is just keep at it. If you have a bad day, all of us have bad days every so often, take the day. So that way you're ready to get back at it tomorrow. And just, you never know, just try. Kind of like to what Minjun was saying, even if you see the job and you're like, I don't know, just try. If it's something that really aligns and fits with what you want to do, the worst thing that you can do is try. And I think that would be my advice.
Awesome, thank you. And Minjun.
Oh, yeah. So my final advice is to be yourself, because the way, if you are really excited about your work and you show your passion when you are presenting your projects, people will also feel very excited to work with you in the future. So be yourself. Yeah.
Love that. That's very important. Thank you. And Cara.
Yeah, I think I agree completely with both of those. Nothing more important than staying hydrated and keeping good care of yourself and being yourself and putting your best foot forward. I would say, just to kind of highlight a few things that stood out to me the most in this conversation, I think it's so true to really lean on your past experience, whatever that is, whether it's the industry or the specific type of degree that you're coming from. Use it to your advantage. It makes you unique to other candidates that are coming in for the same role. Try to get that one big slam dunk project that is just a little bit different than what other folks have on their portfolio, whether it's, like I mentioned, from an internship or something with peers. Maybe even you're at a company now that has a design team or a UX team or researchers. could you start shadowing them? Could you get involved in some way and get a project for your portfolio from there? And then lastly, I think Minjun had just mentioned as well, ask for feedback. I've had candidates reach out for me to feedback after reach out to me for feedback after interviews, and I'm happy to chat, and I think most hiring managers will be, but everything's a learning experience, and I think it's important to not take things too personally, but feel that truly feedback can be a productive gift and can kind of help you on whatever that next interview is. So seek it where you can, seek it from peers, seek it from interviewers. Yeah, and just keep at it, and it will work out, as Maya said.
Thank you so much, Cara. All right, I think we went a bit over time, but I do want to make sure we have the chance to answer some questions from the audience. So please, if you have any questions, put them into the chat. And we have one here already from Teresa, who says that they are learning so much already. And I'm curious how many interviews and what types of challenges you had for your current position. Also, for hiring managers, how long is your company's hiring process for positions above associate?
I can answer since I just recently interviewed. I am a product designer, so that's like one step up. We do have an associate level, more junior than this one. And the interview process went something like this, which I think is fairly typical in that I had a phone screen, then I had a Zoom meetings just like this with the design director. After that, I had a app critique where they let me know ahead of time, and I got to choose which app I was going to critique, as well as that presentation. As we mentioned, I gave the same presentation to the design director as well as the other folks in which was a larger group for this third step, as well as I believe I had some one-on-one time with a designer in the studio just to meet with them, as well as our PM to meet with them as well. So just to break that up, there was like a 30-minute phone call. Then I had about a 1-hour presentation with the design director separately. And then I had I think it was about 3 hours, but it was broken up, app critique, design presentation, and then the culture fit type of very casual meetings. And then that was all of them, because there was like a final conversation with like the salary negotiation thing. And then I think that was the full part of the question, or was there another part of the question? Sorry.
Nope, no worries. So the next part was for hiring managers. How long is your company's hiring process for positions above associate?
Happy to touch on that. It sounds like, Maya, it sounds like ours is relatively similar to what you just described, but typically the way I can speak to Notarize, which is where I am a hiring manager right now. But I would say it's similar to past companies as well. So typically starting out with a 30-minute call with our recruiter, just to ensure that everything is a logistic fit and that it would be worth each party's time to kind of move forward. Next is another 30 or 45-minute call with the hiring manager. If that goes well, it would move on to the final round, which would be typically a 1-hour portfolio project presentation, followed by meeting with a couple other cross-functional members of the team, typically a PM, engineering. And then from there, if needed, maybe one more conversation if we're tightly between a couple candidates. But it's interesting how it's changed a little bit with the remote world. So I know some folks are still organizing interviews into like a 3-hour block in a single day, whereas others are choosing to do, a 30-minute call and then do the next one like 3 days later and stuff. So it tends to come in all shapes and forms, but there's usually a few rounds, and portfolio is typically the big ticket meeting, I would say.
Thank you. All right, we got lots of questions coming in here. So from Carrie, should you bother applying to positions that do not match your current case studies in your portfolio? It's a good question.
I think so. I think as some folks on the call said, go for it. You don't really have anything to lose. If it's not going to be too time consuming to apply, I think it's worth it. I think it can certainly help if your projects are more closely related to the type of work that you will be doing, but you might get that first call. And if you do, then you have the opportunity to really speak to it. And maybe a way to ensure the likelihood of that is also to write a smart cover letter. Tell us why, your experience is relevant if it's not immediately obvious from the portfolio. So I think that's one thing none of us touched on yet. Cover letters help. I think a really friendly cover letter never hurts.
Yeah, I can also add some point to this question. I think I definitely I will apply to that position as well, because you can also think about from the skill set this kind of perspective. So like intention design, visual design, product thinking, communication, collaboration, self-awareness. So there must be some specific skill set from your case study that can be applied to this specific position. So just show that skill during your interview. Yeah.
Yep, that's great advice. And Carrie also asks if anyone here would be willing to review a portfolio. So for anybody attending who's interested in helping to review a portfolio, please message Carrie Dwyer through the chat. From Rose, do you have any advice to someone who is looking for a complete career change? Where would you start? Any courses or specializations hiring managers recommend that you want to see on a resume?
I can take this. So I think one thing I would say is UX is a constant cycle of learning and doing. So I think part of what's important is not getting too caught up on like the letters next to your name, what kind of degree you have, what school you went to, because at the end of the day, all the hiring managers I've met are focused on what you did. What did you learn? What did you do? So I think there's a bunch of free resources online. I think one thing that's important to measure is how do you learn best? Can you self-study or do you require more of a class setting? I required a class setting, which is why I invested in a boot camp, and it worked out well for me for a number of reasons. I think each setting gives you different things. Flexibility, accountability, so you have to measure that for yourself. But after you get that knowledge, it's important to do something with it and start those projects. I think someone else in the chat asked a question about like finding projects, but sites like catchafire.org, things where you can do like nonprofit projects, or if you know a friend that has, like a company and they're looking to redo their website, whatever it is, if you read the book, The Design of Everyday Things, how can we apply this now into a project? Even if it's not going in your portfolio, at least to get that going. So then that way, maybe the next project you do does end up in your portfolio. So yeah, just keeping that constant cycle of learning something and then what we're going to do with it.
And to tack on to that, mostly just to add another perspective in there is 100% agreed with everything you just said. But I went the other route in that I did the self-teaching for a while first. So what I did was I looked at all of the boot camps and grabbed all of their syllabi because, at the time, some of these boot camps are quite expensive, as well as master's degrees are no joke either. And then found online reputable resources and read all of that stuff, and then got a really good base going, as well as, found a internship, aka I helped out some friends on a project that they were doing to build that portfolio as you just described, and I ended up rounding out all of that in the end with a boot camp, but like a super pared down, more like learn on your own course type of way. So both options totally can work for what you're looking for.
That's awesome. That's great advice to look for the syllabi for the boot camps and do a little self-learning there. So the next question is from Samantha about how to incorporate more real life projects. How would you suggest finding diverse projects to work on when you're first starting out? Mariana and Maya, you both just touched on this a bit. Anyone else have anything to add on this point? This is like the $1 million question here. How do you get the experience without any experience?
Yeah, this is tough. I think the only thing I would add on is, if you are a company right now that has UX folks there, see what you can do with them. Ask your manager if it'd be okay if you shadowed somebody on that team for a couple hours a week. See if there's any small projects they can give to you. Even if you can just shadow, I think that's a really great start if you have that resource at your current employer.
Can I add something onto that?
Yeah, of course.
I think something that can also be helpful. I had a conversation with someone who works at Target the other day, and they are also looking for like an early career UX role. Is just opening your eyes, even if you work part-time or full-time somewhere else now, what's the software that you're working with at work? Like, are you a server and do you use Toast? Could you possibly do an app critique of that? Could you do a case study of that? So that way, while you're at work, you're staring at this anyway, thinking about like, what are the points of friction, when working with the kitchen or working with the people that you're serving at a table or something. So really just keeping your eyes open for any of those small opportunities that already exist in your day-to-day, because you know the product really well, and then you can speak to it later on.
That's great advice. All right. I'm sorry, we likely won't get to all of these questions. There's so many great questions in here. Let's keep going for a few more minutes. We'll try and get through a few more here if folks can stick around for a little bit longer. Are there any UX boot camps you recommend or prefer over others? Any?
I went to General Assembly. I think everyone is going to have a different experience and a different opinion. I've seen a lot of online commentary about a lot of different boot camps. I think the answer is it depends. I would say speak to someone in the admissions office. Like Maya said that she did, get their syllabus, learn about really just like prod, especially for the price tag. If there's a hefty price tag, make sure that you're getting what it's worth. Ask about like after you graduate, like, are there any resources that you can leverage? Is there an alumni network? Really getting the details. I don't know too much about any other boot camps, in all fairness. I think when I was first looking, I just did like price comparisons, so pretty surface, but yeah, definitely do your research and no rush.
As well as I also ended up doing General Assembly, but I also worked as a mentor for Thinkful, which is owned by Chegg, last year for about like 6 months. And I would say, at least from that point of view, as well as thinking back to the General Assembly one, is a lot of these boot camps, as well as feel free to check out the syllabi, is they all tend to cover the same type of topics. And it's similar to any type of school in that a lot of it is you, in that the amount of time that you invest in it is important, the amount of time that you spend studying, the amount of resources you check out outside of it, the amount of time you spend trying to differentiate yourself, like what you put into it is what you'll get out of it, is the best way that I'll put it. And some boot camps will be much more all-encompassing than others. And so check out what might fit what you need first, as well as test out different things.
Great advice. And if you're thinking about doing a boot camp, check out, I believe it's switchup.org. They do rankings of boot camps, read reviews too. Those are really important to see what past folks think of boot camp. Do you recommend taking UX courses in order to find UX research jobs? Do those certifications hold merit? Any initial thoughts on this one? I'm happy to take this one quickly. UX research is tough because there's not many UX research boot camps. Most of the boot camp programs are UX design focused. But look into some things like Nielsen Norman Group. They do some interesting classes that are more closely related to UX research. And I would say Nielsen Norman Group probably has some of the best reputation in the UX world. So definitely check them out if UX research is something that you're interested in learning more about and getting into. Okay, a couple more here. Let's take two more questions. So many jobs required at least 3 years experience, but as a new designer in the field, I don't have that much experience. What should I do? Does school count as experience? Should I continue getting internships until I have 3 years of experience?
This is a very tough question. I think it is it's unfortunately an indication of the market right now. I think there are a lot of senior and mid-level postings. I'm speaking for Boston, I suppose. I see Mariana nodding as well, but this is tough. I think that I don't think that 3 years experience is entry level. That's clearly not. I don't think anyone on this call feels that way. I unfortunately don't think that most hiring managers would say that school counts, though. I think they would consider it to be the actual work experience. That said, I have seen some things out there that might be a little bit longer term than internships, such as apprenticeships or contracting positions that potentially might have a lower expectation for past experience. So things like that could certainly add up. I don't think you need to do that until you have 3 years, but doing that until you have 1 year could make a huge difference. Like it really could. This is a very tough question. And I think that there aren't enough positions out there right now for 0 to 1 years of experience. But it unfortunately goes back to, how much can companies support those positions? If anybody has a more optimistic answer, please chime in.
I can add one more point. Yeah, I totally agree with like a years of experience will make a huge difference, because a lot of time like you have to have some experience, a year of experience working with PM, engineer, or other stakeholder, because a lot of time they will ask you a question around whether if like you have a conflict with your product manager, what would you do? Could you tell me about the time you have a disagreement with the engineer? How do you handle your design? So all these kind of specific questions coming from your interview, you should get the experience so you can answer this question. So I think like no matter like how many internship you get, just make sure that you are exposed to this kind of role where you can work with different stakeholders, so you can grab this thing as an example into your future interview.
Yeah, that is incredibly, incredibly well said. I think, as there are certain specific questions and specific experiences that hiring managers are looking for you to speak to, and you might be able to get that all in one internship and knock it out of the park with all the answers. So
all right, last question. I'm so sorry again that we can't get to all of the questions, but I think we're going to be closing out with you, Mariana, on this question. So how can I find out more about UX research ops and coordination? I have a burgeoning interest in UXR, but it would be a large career pivot. I have experience in academic medical research and in regulatory affairs in pharma. I didn't even know UX research ops coordination existed until tonight.
Great question. So I think a lot of people didn't know it existed until recently. I'm still telling people all the time. And I would say definitely if you can Google the REOPS, so like research ops but shortened, REOPS community, and it should take you to a website, and from there you can find like the Slack channel, and in that Slack channel there's different resources, there's jobs floating around. So even if you're not ready to apply now, you can go through the listings and kind of see what people are looking for. The one thing that I will say about research operations is it's not always a linear path to research. So if you are very interested, and I think that's a fair distinction to make, when a lot of employers are looking for research operations people, they want them to stay in research operations. So if that's what you get jazzed about, definitely look into it. Sometimes there is that pathway for growth in a company that the research ops person can transition to a researcher, but it's not a guaranteed at every company. So just to be aware of that. And yeah, I'm also happy to connect. I can drop my LinkedIn and we can talk more about research operations and how you know if it's a good fit for you, and different tools and platforms and things like that.
Thank you so much, Mariana. And sorry to the few folks who asked some questions at the end that we didn't end up getting to, but please connect with us and reach out. We're happy to happy to answer further. And thank you so much to our panelists. You are all incredible. And I learned so much from you all, and I'm sure everybody here did as well. So just like a muted round of applause from everyone in the audience who we can't even see, but we know that they're there. Thank you so much again. And thank you to everybody for attending. And we hope to see you at another Ladies at UX event in the future.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.